quality of life is going to be the number one way that you protect yourself from anything. When you have quality of life, your attention isn't even focused in a direction of needing to defend oneself, shield oneself, protect oneself. You win if you have quality of life here on earth. Once we start to understand just how powerful our energy and our thoughts are, a very popular question that many people going through a spiritual awakening ask is, how do we protect ourselves from psychic attacks? So today, I'm going to be explaining the number one way to protect yourself from a psychic attack, as well as many different ways that we might mistake a psychic attack for just negative energy. There are many different ways to protect ourselves from psychic attacks, and I won't be going over every single one of them. And not every form of protection from a psychic attack is equal. Some are far more powerful, and that's the ones that I'm going to be focusing on today. Because the number one thing to do when a person feels like they're experiencing a psychic attack is understand the law of one. A psychic attack is more than negative energy being focused in your direction. It is specifically when ill will, harm, or malevolence is being sent to you by another person or group. It can be through an intentional ritual or simply by intentionally or unintentionally concentrating thoughts and feelings of harm onto another person. The law of one is the best protection from psychic attacks. The law of one is the truth of our reality. We can never escape this basic truth that we are all a part of God consciousness. This is what the spiritual term oneness means, and this is what unity consciousness means, that we are all connected through the unified field of consciousness. How reality shows us this truth is by teaching us through reflections. These reflections, called karma, give us the same action or energy that we sent out. Karma is like holding up a mirror to ourselves so we can see that we are all one with others. That's ultimately what its purpose is, to teach us the law of one. That way we can learn from our deeds and actions and evolve into unity consciousness. Through the law of one, if you send a psychic attack to someone or something, that action will come back to you even stronger than it was sent out. Because of this, it costs far more energy for a person or group to send out psychic attacks because they receive that energy back in some way. The attack does not even need to come back to them in the same exact way they sent it out, but they will still receive the strength of their intentions and actions in some form. If we want to shield ourselves from psychic attacks, we must know the law of one. Because just like karma gives us the reflection of our negative actions, we are also given the reflections of our conscious actions. If we send compassion to the person or group that is sending the psychic attack to us, that will protect our field from being on the same wavelength or realm that the psychic attack is trying to reach us on. The energy will not reach us. If you can't send compassion, then at the very least, focus on gratitude for the things you have in your life. Compassion will not only protect you by shifting you to a higher wavelength where you will not experience the repercussions of the attack, it will also accelerate the person who is sending you the psychic attack's own karmic mirror. Opening the heart center is the only true and lasting way of being able to protect oneself from psychic attacks. And that's because the heart center pulls our entire energy field into a higher level of being. So because of that, our energy field won't be at the level that the psychic attack is being sent at. So you could think of an open heart center as being one that elevates your entire energy field above the radio station channel that the psychic attack is sending the psychic energy on. If you're not dialed into that channel that attack is on, then you won't even be experiencing a reality where you're suffering the consequences of whoever the person sending the energy is. That will make you a sovereign being. Opening the heart center is one of the core features of spiritual sovereignty. They can't really coexist without one another. So because of that, If a person, first of all, always views themselves as constantly under attack or as constantly threatened, they're a magnet for those type of psychic attacks, because they're basically saying, I live on the radio station where anything and everyone could touch me and affect me and harm me. That is not powerful, and that's not even the position that a person who's coming and operating from their heart center is truly on. Because when a person is absolutely, for sure, how you can identify that they are operating from their heart center and from the law of one, and that their consciousness is anchored into oneness, is they're not always concerned about other people's energy because they know their own power. Now, none of this is meant to negate the fact that psychic attacks are real and they happen. So none of this is denying that reality. Instead, what it's doing is allowing us to understand that in the level of consciousness known as oneness, where the law of one even comes from, that level of reality doesn't even perceive the person who is sending a negative attack or a psychic attack as someone worthy, as someone powerful enough to actually accept and receive that energy. Because when you're coming from oneness, it's not that you're this, like prima donna that goes, you're not worthy. Instead, you understand where that level of pain comes from. And you don't even need compassion for this. I know that this is going to be a very controversial point when I'm talking about psychic protection and the heart center, to also mention that you don't need compassion to not receive something, but it's absolutely true. And the moment a person starts thinking that they actually genuinely need to have compassion for whoever is sending that psychic attack, now they're in a conflict of cognitive dissonance with their own being. So that is not even what's required in order to protect oneself from a psychic attack. It's not, I have to love this person who's trying to harm me, okay? That is a false light teaching. The reason why there's truth to the fact that compassion is even more of a powerful and amplifying force is, one, because compassion in the face of some sort of negative or psychic attack, true compassion. I'm not talking about one where we heard that we had to be compassionate and now we're disowning our humanity in order to meet some sort of false persona within ourselves. But I'm talking about genuine compassion that comes from beings who are so anchored and living and breathing in the law of one. That's because their next level of initiation is embodying unconditional love to that extent. So does that mean that every single person who wants to open their heart and protect their energy field from psychic attacks needs to be completely at that level of spiritual mastery? Not at all. Because the heart center isn't even that strict. Think about that, how that's an oxymoron for the heart center to be that rigid. Instead, the heart center is more concerned about always meeting you where you're at. And that's a really good thing, or else that would be a really sad and scary heart center. The heart center, it wants to connect with you at where your capacity is, not where someone else's journey is at. And so we're always looking at opening our heart, not from someone else's own level of mastery. We look at how we're opening our heart because transparency, which means being honest and open and truthful about our capacity, is going to be the true way to open the heart. And anytime we try to leave ourselves out of the equation, self-sacrifice ourselves out of that equation just to open the heart, it's a very beautiful and innocent problem that many spiritual people go through, and they end up getting some sort of attraction or some sort of mirror in their reality showing just how much that was an unself-loving action. So it comes back in the form of a lesson that was leaving ourselves out of the equation of unconditional love. And if it's true unconditional love, it's not going to leave you out. So when we're opening the heart center, and that's truly where we're coming from, for protecting ourselves from psychic attack. It's just, if we take this all the way to its like easiest, most basic requirement, it's just not sending the same level of ill will back. When a person is fully operating inside their wounded, separate self, their wounded ego, what they're doing is constantly in some sort of state of inferiority or constantly in some sort of lack. And because of that, believe it or not, they have more energy for conflict and they have more energy for petty, useless drama. And that would sound weird because if you're in lack and you're in desperation and separation, you would actually think you have less energy and you need to really conserve your energy. But it's the opposite. The more a person steps into oneness, that doesn't mean that they stop caring about the world or taking actions. Instead, what they're doing is coming from what genuinely matters. And you'll see that their care is focused in a direction that is serving themselves and others. It is serving all. It's not one where it's just self-serving. So their focus is naturally on the well-being of all. And if it's not on explicitly the well-being of all, it's in the well-being of their environment, of their surrounding community in some way. It's not just pointed at themselves. And because of that, they have energy. They have a lot of energy. People who are operating in higher levels of consciousness have more health. So because of that, they're able to have a lot more energy. But that energy is not the same frequency. It's not the same vibration as the energy that people who are coming from the separate self, where they're constantly in victim-perpetrator, internal division within themselves. So they're just sending out psychic energy, negative energy, and psychic attacks. That type of energy needs more. It needs to be more volatile. It needs to be more conflict-oriented and dramatic. So because of that, it gets eaten up, almost like if you were to put a paper in a fire. It's quick. It's not a log. It's not something that's going to sit there and really digest inside the fire. So what you'll see is that people that are operating, even in the realm to where they're throwing out psychic attacks, are doing so because they want to hook in to a conflict. They want that drama. It helps maintain their sense of separateness. It helps maintain their ego. It gives them something to fight against and to fight for themselves, of course. So it's constantly keeping them preoccupied in victim-perpetrator cycle. It constantly absorbs them into something that allows their petty dramas to be digested and avoid having to go into higher states of consciousness that are less stimulating, shall we say. And it's just because oneness and the higher states of consciousness, even if a person is not operating fully in oneness, those higher states of consciousness aren't that addicted to petty drama. And because they're not addicted to petty drama, they're not going to be as stimulating to the ego, the wounded ego's version of what it views as energy and worthiness of attention. Because once again, when you're operating in oneness, you're not addicted to petty drama. And so that is naturally, on its own, without you having to even worry about protection, going to be your first layer of protection from having an open heart center. That's not the only one, but that's going to be your first layer. It's your baseline is your energy and your attention isn't even focused on petty stuff. So whether a person knows it or not, if they're operating from higher consciousness, they're operating within the law of one, and that's naturally going to give them more energy, but it's not going to give them more energy for drama and conflict. As a matter of fact, they'll become far more exhausted from having to lower their energy so much into that realm of pettiness and conflict. So it's actually going to be where you have less energy for that type of petty drama and that petty conflict. Now, once again, that doesn't mean that you don't have energy for taking actions in the world or being a spiritual warrior. Instead, it's going to be for something that's not petty and something that's going to be benefiting more than the person, or for only a self-serving agenda. They'll have energy, and if they don't have energy, there's many people who are going through large spiritual awakenings, and they have very high levels of consciousness, and they're probably going, what do you mean I can't be unhealthy? When you're going through a healing still, that doesn't mean that you're low vibes or that you're not in oneness. Many people are also still healing physical health issues, and it's not because of their bad thoughts. It's actually because they've taken on very important missions for humanity and are transmuting a lot of ancestral trauma within their own lineages, but they're also healing galactic themes. And when we're healing galactic themes, then it won't make sense at a human perspective level how a person can have a high level of consciousness and be operating in the law of one, but then also be so sick. And it's because not everything is just based off of if you are polluted or if you have emotional trauma stored inside the cells of your body. Those are some factors. They're not at all of them. They're actually a very small portion of the whole reality of what's going on. So because of that, we could even look at many people who have high levels of consciousness going through a shamanic initiation. And those ailments that they're experiencing at a physical level aren't showing them that they're not high vibe. Instead, they're beyond the paradigm that we're currently viewing things through. Like I said, we're looking at things now at a universal and a galactic level. And at that, all bets are off on exactly what our body, mind, spirit came in here to balance and heal, not just for ourselves, but once again, for all. Now, it's very important for us to define what a psychic attack is, because this will also determine just how spiritually sovereign we are. For instance, if we go around thinking that any time somebody is sending us negative energy or bad vibes, that is a psychic attack, we will spend our whole lives suffering. And that's no fun, and that's going to just create a feedback loop where now we're experiencing more psychic attacks. Instead, we have to be able to define what exactly is a psychic attack so that now we understand things better and we can actually discern what is going on. And discernment is going to give everyone a lot of power, which is why it belongs to somebody who's spiritually sovereign. So, a psychic attack is not when somebody is sending you negative energy or bad vibes. If that were the case, every single person on earth would be screwed, because we're sending negative energy or bad vibes all the time, even at a subconscious level, if you're just going on social media and you're displeased at something that you're viewing. So a person who is spiritually sovereign will first need to be able to define what exactly is the level and degree of this negative energy that is being concentrated and directed at you. Because if it's, once again, just anybody sending out psychic bursts of judgment, psychic bursts of bad vibes and negative energy headed in our direction, that is not something that's going to have enough weight. That's not going to be something substantial enough to fit the criteria of a psychic attack. As a matter of fact, bad energy being sent in anyone's direction is something that could show us just how common it is and how we might do it ourselves. And that would actually give us more compassion, because it would show us our shared humanity. And when we see our shared humanity, not only is that not going to affect us because we're not agreeing that having negative energy sent at us is going to harm us or affect us, but on top of that, that's going to make us more self-aware. And then that's going to open our heart more, because we're going to go, wow, if I'm being genuinely honest with myself, if I'm being very transparent and intimate with myself, I could see that I am not in control of every single thought that I think subconsciously and consciously within a 24-hour day. And so we'll begin to start having more compassion for ourselves and for others and our shared humanity. This is going to be not only the first doorway to more spiritual sovereignty through compassion, it's also going to allow us to harness more of our psychic energy. And I mean harness more of our psychic energy, because whether we know it or not, the more spiritually sovereign we become and the more conscious we become, the more we go through a spiritual awakening and we awaken more, we become more energetically powerful. That's a fact that all of us not only need to know, we need to keep in mind, because we need to use that through awareness and responsibility. So, would you want a spiritual master in front of you who has a bunch of psychic, powerful energy to harshly abuse their power on you because they saw that you were like not having perfect thoughts in a day and you had a bunch of judgments or denials, or you sent them on accident or intentionally bad energy because you didn't understand what they said, or you took something wrong? Like would you want a spiritual master with a bunch of psychic powerful energy to blast you? No. So the more we become spiritually sovereign, you'll see that it's not about the level of power to abuse it. That wouldn't even be the heart center. So what you'd see is that you awaken the heart center through the opposite of that. You awaken the heart center more by your shared humanity. Nothing's going to get you past your humanity. To go into your divinity, you must take your humanity not only with you, you must go through your humanity. So compassion for our shared humanity is going to be the number one doorway. But then after that, what you're going to see is that it's going to naturally come with more self-respect. And when you have more self-respect, because you're raising your consciousness, therefore you're raising your standards, therefore you're producing more self-love, therefore you're taking actions that are more self-loving. All of this is creating an environment of self-respect. So the more you raise your consciousness, it ought to reflect in your environment in the form of self-respect. And within that, now what you'll be able to do is have healthy boundaries. The false light desperately wants to portray an open heart as being something that actually leaves us very vulnerable to psychic attacks and very weak. It wants to appeal the higher states of mastery to our ego. So it wants us to be dishonest. It wants us to be in internal conflict with ourselves. That way we don't ever truly get into the truth of our heart center and start operating in genuine spiritual sovereignty. So that's going to be done through having healthy, loving boundaries. And as I said, the false light wants to turn those tables. They want to go, you can't have boundaries. You can't have boundaries. An ego only has boundaries. If you're truly heart-centered, you have to let me spit in your heart, right? You have to like open up your heart and let me spit in it. That's not what the law of one is asking. That's not what spiritual sovereignty means. So an open heart center does not mean that you are a doormat for other people's unconsciousness, for other people's projections, for other people's negative energy. You're allowed, it's a part of your own evolution to have healthy boundaries where you're able to assert your voice, where you're able to assert your standards. Standards are a reflection of our self-love. The less standards we have, you can bet that's like a false light type of person who's far more interested in appearances of spirituality and mastery rather than the genuine thing. So the heart center is not asking you to receive negative energy for the sake of being able to be a spiritual master. You're allowed to have, and you ought to have, healthy boundaries. But within those healthy boundaries that you have set in your environment and that you're able to voice and assert, now, with that self-respect that created those standards and those healthy boundaries have also created is a version of yourself. Hopefully, we want to hope that this is giving you enough unconditional love. It's fueling your resources, your emotional and energetic resources, so that now you're not coming from a depleted place. The heart center is not asking you to deplete it yourself for it. Instead, it's asking you to give up all of the petty versions of yourself that are not your true self. Okay, do you see the difference? One is asking you to mature and evolve, and that's healthy. That's stepping into the heart center. That's going to naturally open up your heart space so that more and more humanity, all beings, everything is included in your heart center as your oneness consciousness. But the false version of that is asking you to release your boundaries and unconditionally love everyone and be selfless. And it's all not coming from true, genuine maturity and inner work that's producing that level of unconditional love. Instead, it's almost like the negative form of the ego's version of that. The one that wants to appear that way, the one that wants to be at that level, but isn't genuinely at that level yet. I see this a lot happen when people don't activate their throat center. So it's easier for them to retreat because even though it's uncomfortable for them not to speak up and to be more hidden inside their true motives and their truth, what'll end up happening is they'll then, because they can't work through the block of opening the throat center and asserting themselves and being the truth inside their reality for others and for themselves, because they can't own their voice, what they'll end up doing is start to romanticize their pettiness. They'll start to romanticize their lack and go, well, actually, this is more wise. This is more spiritual. And it's not. It's actually just a person's wounding that now they don't actually want to go through the discomfort of working through their journey. So instead, they're just romanticizing their own wounds. That is the false version of an open heart. So because of that, an open heart isn't going to look meek. It's not meek. But when you open your heart through your shared humanity with others, not through denying it, through your shared humanity, and when you open your heart through the compassion and for well-being for all, and for going into oneness, consciousness, and then you're able to assert self-loving boundaries, which are just self-loving standards. And you're able to activate your voice to assert yourself because you know that speaking your truth will either purify your truth or it will help another person awaken. All of this is going to create something that is one of the most important features of spiritual sovereignty. And this is the key to really being able to protect your energy field from psychic attacks. And that's all of this cultivation of an open heart center has a fruit called mercy. When you are sufficiently in quality of life, when you sufficiently are coming from oneness and coming from the law of one, what you have is the capacity to forgive other people's ignorance. And I don't mean forgive in a way where you say, I forgive or whatever. You just have mercy for consciousness that isn't as mature as yours. So it's one of those things where if somebody's coming from a really wounded or immature consciousness, that's the same as if an adult is giving mercy to how crazy a child is acting. It's not where you like it, you don't have to like it. It's not where you respect it, or it's not where you're so loving and forgiving of it. Instead, you just have mercy. It's just mercy. They're just not coming from a very clear and sufficient space. They're clearly coming from a state of lack. They're clearly probably possessed. Just going to be honest, most psychic attacks come through portals in a person's blind spots from far darker entities. So they're just possessed. And they're not much of a being, to be honest, that is worthy of being scared of. They don't have enough power. As a matter of fact, people who have psychic attacks that they send out to people are powerless. They're in that state of vibration, and that's why they're doing that in the first place. Beings that have true power are coming once again from the law of one, and they don't got energy at that petty of a level to be exerting, to have drama and psychic things coming all from a lower state of lack, separateness, powerlessness, inferiority. The number one sign of a psychic attack is if we experience unexplainable nausea. This is our body trying to protect itself by repelling and purging the energy from our field. The second sign of a psychic attack is if our throat center is being shut down or closed. Now, when I'm telling you about an open heart being the highest and lasting protection, that does not mean that you can't stand up for yourself, and this does not mean that you can't defend yourself. Standing up for yourself, protecting yourself and others is absolutely fine, as long as we know that shielding ourselves treats the symptoms of the issue. Protection should be used for you to feel safe in your humanity. It is never meant to replace our spiritual evolution, which is through opening the heart center. There are several and more ways to shield oneself from others' ill will and malevolent focus. What is most important to do is to break any energetic connection with the person, if there is one. That way they do not have a direct line to send you energy through. This means if you follow people on social media, or if they're a contact inside your phone, that is the most direct energetic connection for telepathic energy to travel through. As an energy healer who spends a lot of time per week clearing negative attachments, negative entities, negative things off of people's energy field, I'm the first one to say that the spiritual community is way too afraid of negative energy. And that's almost why many people in the community work themselves into a frenzy for no reason. And it's just because really a lot of the times it's their own projections. Their own projections are focused on somebody going, oh my God, I'm scared of that person. But instead of saying that I'm scared of that person because they represent things I haven't owned within my own self, or because they represent things I don't know, instead of just examining their own internal reactions and responses to a person, they'll instead do the cheap man's version of that. They'll instead go, well, I must be getting negative energy sent to me from this person. And that is the surest way to just disempower yourself and to just be in the ego's version of specialness. Because once again, negative energy is kind of the baseline here in this reality. So what we want to focus on, if we can't focus on having quality of life, because real talk, quality of life is going to be the number one way that you protect yourself from anything. When you have quality of life, your attention isn't even focused in a direction of needing to defend oneself, shield oneself, protect oneself. So quality of life, you win if you have quality of life here on earth. So it's all about cultivating quality of life. Then it doesn't matter what radio station, whatever person sending anything, because you have quality of life, you won. But if you can't have quality of life, then at least you will go through a healing journey to open the heart, because what a person might find is that at the end of that tunnel, a person really was sending negative energy, but it was probably just in the form of the constant thoughts that every single person thinks in a day's time. So it was a lot of assessment. Sometimes we can feel people's assessments going on, but we mistake that for being negative, and then we get scared. It's just assessments. Or what we'll see is that it's genuinely something where a person felt that they were in so much lack compared to us that they were genuinely trying to harm us in some way. Usually what you'll see is the toxic feminine. Even with men and women do this. They'll go and they'll spread lies about somebody, or they'll go and they'll try to tarnish someone's name. And it's really because of their own inferiority or their own insecurities. So that is something that a person isn't just being gaslit about. That's something that's a genuine psychic attack. So it's not that they don't happen. It's just that we have to be able to assess, are we intuiting that someone else is just going through their own process of thoughts and assessments about us, and then will we let that really affect us? An empowered person wouldn't be affected by that, and they'd understand that they do that too. Or if a person, like I said, is genuinely trying to harm your energy field in some way by somehow diminishing you, that's a psychic attack. That's a psychic attack. And what that needs isn't just to go into sheer forgiveness. That's a false light tactic. Instead, it's going through that process of having healthy standards, healthy boundaries, asserting oneself from a conscious space through their throat center, speaking truth, because truth is the light. So you're shedding light on where there was shadow. You're shedding light on where there was tactics, pettiness, maneuvers, those things. Okay, so you're being the light. You're not being like the false version of the light, where you have to dress up your wounded ego that doesn't know how to speak up for itself. So all these things are going to lead into the heart space. They're not separate from the heart space. Your heart space wants you to be whole. Your heart space wants you to be holy. So it's not going to have you have to leave something out to get there. But once you're in this space enough and sufficiently, you're going to have such quality of life that unconditional love comes more frequently. And what we're going to be looking at is not the staunch and rigid parameters of, am I always constantly in unconditional love? Because you're going to have an open heart, and that's going to lead to more self-compassion and gentleness. Instead, what you're going to do is go, do I have unconditional love more frequently? Am I a powerful spiritual sovereign who's so powerful that I can bestow mercy? And most importantly, do I have quality of life? Can I be the representative of love in this environment, since it's clearly missing a representative of love? And if I can't be that representative of sheer unconditional love, then at least can I have compassion for the fact that anyone who is sending that level of psychic attack through the law of one is going to get it back times 3, way worse? Can I at least have compassion for that? I hope this has helped protect you from bad vibes. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.